On Christ, the solid rock we stand. Amen? All of the ground is what? Sinking sand. Y'all have a seat. You know what? We sang some things, broad thematic kinds of things over the last several songs about God's leadings and God's guidance. And it feels good, doesn't it? It feels good when it's going good. But what about when it's not? A lot of us coming into a brand new year with lots of baggage. Maybe we've been blessed in 2011. Maybe we've got some tough stuff in 2011. What's it looking like? Let me ask you a question this morning. What does the future look like to you right now? Here we are in January. It's time of the month, time of the year that we do that, isn't it? We kind of close the books on the past and we look to the distant horizon of the future. The event horizon's there. What does God have in store for you, and what does God have in store for me? And here we are, the fourth Sunday, really, of the month. You realize the year's almost over. Do y'all realize that? I mean, it's racing by. We're already far enough into January. You've forgotten your New Year's resolutions, haven't you? I mean, let me ask you, what does the future look like? What do you see out there? And you know what? It kind of depends on the venue in which you look, doesn't it? How does the economic future look? How does the future of your job look? What's going on politically? What's going on in our governments? What's going on the international scene? What's going on around the place? What's China doing out there, y'all? Does that have an impact? I want to tell you what this army, this massive military buildup that they're going through and all the economic issues there, and you realize out of the debt that we owe, they hold the majority of the ticket on that. Did you realize this year we're going to be on the north side of $16 trillion in indebtedness? Payday's going to be someday. Cat's not going to be pretty, is it? What's the future hold, y'all? I was in life group 2 weeks ago, sitting in Bill Oberle's life group, and Bill made a statement in there. He said that Americans are naturally programmed to be optimistic. You agree with that? Bill's not here in second service, so if you want to disagree with that, go ahead. Do you agree with that? You know what? I agree with that. I really agree with that. And I realize I'm starting 2012 with 2 strikes against me because I'm agreeing with Bill Oberle. But I want you to think about here just for a second. Americans are naturally programmed to be optimistic. Did you realize that throughout the world, folks look at America as people that are hopeful, as people that are filled with opportunity, that are people that are optimistic? That's the way the world looks at us. And it's been that way for generations. Let me tell you something that a fellow named Anthony Jay, he wrote a book called Management and Machiavelli. And in that book, he tells this example of a friend of his, true story, from England who was traveling. He was here in the country and he was traveling back to England, and he was in JFK Airport, and he kind of pulled in there to change planes, of course, but he's in there to get something to eat, something to drink, and his accent, being from England, gives him away. So as soon as he does his little thing and he sits at his table, a total complete stranger comes racing across the airport there and says, "You're not from here, are you?" And when he said that, he had the same accent that Jay's friend had. And Jay said, "No, and you're not either, are you?" And he said, "No, I'm not." And so the stranger said, "Where are you from?" And Jay's friend said, "I'm from Cobham." He said, "Oh, that's a wonderful place." Jay's friend said, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Epsom Downs." He said, "It's the loveliest place in the world." And he got kind of, ethereally misty-eyed as he kind of dreamed about, and he says, so Jay's friend is sitting here and he's thinking, and he said, "Wow," he said, "You must really love it here." He said, "No, I loathe it." He said, "Well, your wife must really, really like it here." He said, "No, she hates it absolutely and totally." He said, "Well, you must have a really good paying job. You must be knocking down some dollars." He said, "The blankety blank blank I am." He said, "I'm working longer than I've ever worked. I work harder than I've ever worked. I'm working more hours than I've ever worked." He said, "It's ridiculous." So Jay's friend says, "Why do you stay here? Why don't you come back to Limey country with us?" And he said, "Because," and he slapped the back of his head kind of hard. He said, "Because," he said, "I got a feeling right here. I got a feeling that tomorrow I'm going to hit the jackpot." I haven't hit it in 11 years, but he said, "I got a feeling that tomorrow is going to be it. It's going to be it." And he said, "It is a feeling that you cannot get in Britain." He said, "I'll never go back." America to him represented opportunity. It represented hope. It represented an optimistic future. You know what we call it? We call it the what? The American dream. That's what it is. Here's the place. This is it. Been with us for generations. Lots and lots of people throughout the world. Look at that. And by the way, our music and a lot of the musicals that, of course, the heyday for musicals is kind of past, I guess. They still do them. But musicals and our movies have to have those good endings. You know, if you want to make it in Hollywood, you want to make it at the box office, it's got to have a good, happy ending. Well, all of that stuff, our entertainment supports that idea. Let me give you another little example here. This guy is also from Britain. That's just coincidental. But this is back in World War II days. He's being mustered out. The war is over. Allied servicemen are coming home by the hundreds of thousands. He's getting ready to be discharged from the Royal Navy. And on a lark with some of his friends, they're going to go and celebrate, and he buys a ticket to a play opening in London. It's the debut night of an American musical. He didn't know anything about it, didn't know what it was about. It was just, he was happy that he had survived the war and that he was going to be going home pretty soon, so off they go. And here's what he says happened. He said when we got there, he said the theater was all lit up. It was all beautiful. He said it's the brightest thing I think that I'd ever seen. He said maybe that's because we'd lived for so many years in a muted lighting and maybe no lighting at all, and it just seemed so bright. And he said everybody as they came up to that theater began to kind of get into that, and they sort of felt that, and the mood became pretty festive. He said when you get inside, he said nothing could prepare me for what happened when I got inside the theater. He said when it started, he said the lights lit up. He said it was like midday. He said it looked like there was a scene that seemed to go back infinitely into the stage. And he said the actors literally leapt on the stage, and the singers and the players and the music came right along. And he said everybody in there was impacted by that. You could sense the mood shifting and the mood changing. And he said when they sang that first song, it was electric. They had everybody in the palm of their hand. Here's the first words that they began to sing. Take a look at your screen, see if you recognize it. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow, and the corn's as high as an elephant's eye. And it looks like it's climbing clean up to the sky. You ever heard those words? What is that? What is that? What's the name of that musical? Yeah, Oklahoma. And then they went into the next verse, y'all. How you feel like singing this morning? Let's go. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. Don't give up your day job, y'all. Here's what I'm telling you. Yeah. I don't know. But that's what they sang. Oklahoma. What war-torn Europe needed, what war-weary America needed. It was time for Oklahoma. By the way, the title of that's not just Oklahoma. It's Oklahoma ! Oklahoma. Optimism. That's the way it was. The musicals of the 40s and the 50s, especially those by Roger and Hammerstein, really keyed in on that theme. And Europeans have always laughed at us about the Pollyanna-ish sort of approach that we take to all that, and that all our movies have to have a happy ending and that sort of thing. Not very existential in the way we sort of carry that stuff out. That's the way it's always been, y'all. But I want to ask you a question. What's in your gut right now about the future? I mean, how is it looking? How does it feel? It seems to me that kind of optimistic edge is getting shaved off just a bit. Now, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just a cranky old stuffy preacher. What do you think? But I drive the same streets that you guys drive. I go to the same stores that you go to, shop in the same malls. I watch the same things on TV. And what I'm seeing is that people are angrier, at least more dogmatic. And I have a sense that optimism maybe not be as it has been in the past. I got no predictions. I'm not a prophet nor a son of a prophet. Who knows what's coming down the pike? You and I live in two worlds. The one world we live in, we got a foot right here in America, and we love America, and we love what she stands for, and we live through all the good times and the bad times, and we can't help but feel that. We're living in a world where we feel a lot of stuff. But folks, we also have a foot in a kingdom, an eternal kingdom. A kingdom that will not fall. A kingdom that overshadows, especially when you allow that message to get into your heart and your soul and let you begin to feel it emotionally, overshadows anything and everything here. We're going to go back to a dark time in Israel's history. Come back with me. Let's go. Isaiah chapter 60, just for a moment. Look here in that. Maybe you've got your electronic Bible with you or your regular page Bible. Flip back to Isaiah chapter 60. We don't go to Isaiah a lot, even though it is the most quoted Old Testament prophet in the New Testament. Sometimes called the Messianic prophet. He is a prophet that talks about Israel, he talks about Judah, he talks about foreign nations. And when you read those prophecies and you look at that history that's captured in chapters 36 through 39, you begin to realize people haven't changed all that much. People are really pretty much the same as they've always been. Circumstances are different and cultures are different and all that. But you know what? The same things are still there. Greed and maliciousness and violence and that hunger for power and that strife. It's still all there. People are basically people whenever they live and wherever they live. You look at Isaiah, you get a real slice of life. Isaiah lived during the reigns of 5 kings of the southern kingdom. Remember, Judah got divided. Israel got divided after Solomon died, under his son Rehoboam. You got 10 tribes to the north, 2 tribes to the south. The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. He lived in Jerusalem. He was under the guidance of those 5 kings. And during 4 of those kings, the reign of 4 of those kings, he prophesied. And I want to tell you, it was dark times. In fact, during the lifetime of Isaiah, he witnessed it with his own eyes. The Assyrian hordes came breezing through and carried away the 10 northern tribes into captivity. It completely abolished them. These were the warriors that are represented in bas relief in antiquities. Represented in bas relief are these bold warriors, hairy men with big long beards, big chests. Sometimes they would have the rear ends of horses on 4 legs, and they're going into battle, and they're pulling captives behind them with fish hooks in their noses as they pull them along. The Assyrian war machine was coming. Isaiah had said it was coming. It was dark, bleak days. He watched it absolutely get swept away, the northern kingdom that is, and all of this business that was Assyria. And then Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, turned his eye over toward the red ruby of Jerusalem. He wanted that sapphire in his belt. And so off he goes. He sends 185,000 men to the southern kingdom, surrounds the capital city of Jerusalem, and lays siege to it. Dark, dark time. God delivered them during the reign of Hezekiah. Hezekiah looked up one morning. All 185,000 of those troops had died during the night by the finger of God. That's the testimony of Scripture. And they felt good, but not too good. It was still pretty dark. It was a really, really difficult time. And then, on the heels of that, Isaiah began to prophesy at the nudging of God, the Spirit of God. He began to prophesy about another army coming, another power coming, the Babylonians, that would wipe out the southern kingdom. Folks, it was dark, it was dark, it was dark. And yet Isaiah begins to speak in chapters 60, 61, and 62. There's a unit there. It begins on the heels of Isaiah 59, starting in verse 17, where Isaiah begins to describe God and what God looks like. He describes God as a warrior God. What does God look like in your mind? How do you see him? When I was a kid, he was, I don't know, God pictured as a sort of a grumpy old man. That's not the picture in Isaiah 59. He's a warrior getting ready for battle. Look here. He's getting on his breastplate. He's getting his weapons together. And he's going to war for his kingdom. Whatever is going on in the world, he's going to war for his kingdom. And I want you to look at verse 20. All that starts in verse 17. But look at verse 20 where he says, the Redeemer. That's the word for God. He buys people back, doesn't he? He restores them and renews them. The Redeemer will come to Zion. Not just talking about physical Israel. Israel never was restored to the glory that it had in the days of David and Solomon. Never saw it again. But he's talking about something else. He's going to redeem Zion to those. He will come to those in Jacob who repent of their sins. Those that are faithful to him. Those that hang on to that kingdom, that other place. Good things are happening. In fact, look at what he says. Chapter 60 and verse 1. Arise, he says. I love that. Get up. Arise and shine, for your light has come. And the glory of the Lord rises upon you. You who? You who are faithful to God. You who are part of that kingdom. Lots of things happen in the world, but look, there's another avenue, another venue. There's something else in store for you who are faithful to God. Arise and shine. The light of God's glory is shining upon you. See, he says in verse 2, darkness covers the earth, Thick darkness is over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you, and His glory appears over you. This is a specific message for a specific time, but there are general truths that are applicable across the board right here. Whether you're living in the days of the Assyrians, or you're living in the days of the Babylonians, or you're living in the days of the Chinese and the Russians and the Americans and the Germans. God is a God who rises up to do battle for His people. A light has come, y'all. No matter how dark it may be about, a light has come. He gets into verse 3, and he begins to talk about things that he's really known for as the Messianic prophet. Nations will come to your light, kings to the brightness of your dawn. Well, again, Israel never reached that former stature and status that it had. The golden years of David and Solomon, never again. But it did deliver a Messiah. One who came to rule His kingdom in justice and in mercy, in peace and in power. And I want to tell you, it is a message that changes mankind. It is a message that changes the world. It's not always the message that you hear from organized religion. Sometimes that kind of irritates you, doesn't it? Sometimes I look at some of that stuff that we say and do and send out and wonder, what in the world is that all about? But the pure message of Jesus, the Messiah of God, is a life-changing message, and there's no message like it anywhere else. Nations march to the kingdom of God. Aren't you grateful to be a part of the kingdom of Jesus? Look at verse 4. What does he say in verse 4? Look up. Look up. Lift up your eyes and look about you. Look up. I love the imagery here. People that are downcast in heart, where are their eyes? Their eyes are downcast as well. What did the psalmist say in Psalm 121? I lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence my help comes. To my God, who is the maker of heaven and earth. That's where we look. That's whose we are. Paul phrases it another way in Colossians chapter 3. After 2 chapters of the greatest Christology that you find anywhere in the Bible. By Christology, I'm talking about the doctrine of Jesus. Where he's talked about the one who's the firstborn from the dead. Where he talks about the one who is the embodiment of everything that God is in bodily form. After he says all those wonderful, powerful things, he says in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 1, look up. Don't put your mind on the stuff down here. There's more to life than fashion police. You know? Look up where God is. When Jesus is revealed in His glory, He says, you and I will be revealed in His glory. Arise, y'all. The light shines, whether we've seen it before or not. No matter how optimistic the country may be or unoptimistic that you might be. Here's the truth. Arise, shine. God goes to battle for His people. Now, I want us to take a couple things home here. And here at core is what it is. At core, here's what it is. I want you to know, you will never be forgotten by God. You will never be alone. Regardless of how it may feel, it'll never happen. Do not develop a case of Elijah-itis. Huh? You remember who Elijah is? Renowned prophet to the Jews. It was Elijah that appeared to Jesus alongside of Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration. But Elijah had his difficulties. One of his heydays, maybe the apex of his ministry, was 1 Kings chapter 18. Do you remember what happened in 1 Kings chapter 18? He is involved in battle with false prophets, the prophets of Baal and the prophets of some of the false gods that God's people had gotten involved with. 850 of them. They have this contest on Mount Carmel. They say, look, we're going to build 2 altars here. And Elijah says, you call out to your God, see if He brings down fire. I'll call out to my God, see if He brings down fire. You go first. Y'all know this story, right? Great battle of Mount Carmel. And so the prophets of Baal and all the prophets of the Ashtoreth begin to cry out, come on, bring on down some fire. Nothing happens. Kind of like I expected. Didn't you? Come on. Nothing happens. It doesn't happen. And Elijah says, maybe he's dozing. Maybe he's asleep back there. If you call out a little bit louder. So they cried out all the more loudly, Baal, Baal, hear us, oh Baal, bring down the fire. Fire, fire, give us fire. Nothing happened. And so Ezekiel said, well, maybe he's relieving himself up behind the barn. I'm putting that a lot more refined than the way Ezekiel put it, all right? Maybe he's relieving himself out beside the barn. You need to really scream out loud. So they screamed out loud and they cut themselves with rocks and the tears were flowing. The spit was flying. The blood was going everywhere. Bring us that fire. No fire. Ezekiel says, my turn. Elijah, what did I say? Well, y'all know what I mean. Yeah, Elijah, what's that? Easy now. Elijah said, bring me some water. Douse that altar. That's not enough. Bring me some more water. Douse the altar. Bring me some more water. Soak it. The water was running in trenches around the altar. He said, God, send us some fire. And fire came down to heaven. That's the message of 1 Kings chapter 8. Tremendous victory. And he said, you guys surround those prophets. Do not let them get away. 850 prophets died that day. Here's the problem. They all were good friends with a woman named Jezebel. You ever wonder why nobody names their daughters Jezebel? It's a wicked, wicked woman. And she happened to be a powerful woman. She was the queen of the southern kingdom, married to the king, a guy named Ahab. Ahab wasn't much of a man. He'd go out and pout when he didn't get his way. I need the vineyard of Naboth. She said, well, quit crying and go get it. Kill the man. You're king. You can do anything you want to do. And so off he would go and he felt all good. She was a wicked, wicked woman. She sent a message to Elijah. Said, may the gods do to me and worse if you're not dead by this time tomorrow. What would you have done? I know you're all bold sitting in here, aren't you? We're all bold. Get out of town in a hurry. He ran as hard as he could all the way down south to the town of Beersheba where he left his servant. Then he ran another day's journey. There's nothing but desert down there. He ran down into the desert, finally collapsed in fatigue underneath a juniper tree or a broom tree, depends on the translation. He collapsed and he cried and he wept. He said, all is lost. Kill me. He prayed for God to kill him. He said, I'm just like my father's, meaning my life hadn't counted for anything. How'd his future look? How'd his future look? Cried himself to sleep. As the story goes, God awakened him, sent an angel and awakened him, brought him a plate of fried chicken. He ate all he wanted, fell back asleep. God woke him up again, fed him again. He found some strength, ran for 40 days all the way to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. He's going to go get some answers from God. Hides out in a cave. And the voice of God comes. It says the word of the Lord came to him. I'm in 1 Kings 19 now. The word of the Lord came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? What a question. What are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah said, well, things have gone to pot back home. Nobody pays any attention to you. The covenant, they've broken your covenant. They break down your altars. They're killing all the prophets of God. I am the only one left, and they're trying to kill me. And God said, Elijah, I want you to get out of this cave, go out to the front of it, because my glory is getting ready to pass by. So he goes out. First thing that passes by in preparation for the glory of God, the first thing that passes by is a powerful wind, knocks everything down. But he says God was not found in the wind. Then an earthquake came, shattered rocks. Imagine the power and the majesty of this God. Shatters every rock in the valley, but he says the glory of God was not found in the earthquake. A fire burns through there before the blazing glory of God, but God was not found in the fire. And then comes a whisper. God was in the whisper. 1 Kings 19 says. What did he say? He said the same thing he said before. What are you doing here, Elijah? That's a good question, isn't it? What you doing here, Bill? What are you doing here, Susan? What are you doing here? Not just here. What's going on in your life? What are you doing here? And the whole demonstration of the earthquake and the fire and the wind was to demonstrate, I don't care what's going on in the world. I don't care how it looks. Do you understand? I am the God of power. I'm the God that brings light. And the glory of my greatness is upon you as my child. Woo, is that a message we need? So he tells Elijah, Get back on your feet. I got something for you to do. And he tells him several little things that he needs to be about the business of doing. He says, by the way, you're not the only one left. 7,000 people have not bowed the knee to Baal. How'd you miss that, Mr. Prophet? 7,000 people have not bowed the knee. You are not alone. You will not be forgotten. What does it say in 2 Timothy 2 and verse 19? The solid foundation of God's kingdom. I love those words. The solid foundation of God's kingdom. What is what? Thus phrase, the Lord knows those who are His. Y'all ever watch Australian football? Anybody in here? No? There's one person in first service that watches it. I don't understand the game. I don't really understand exactly what they're... Oh, get out of here. Do you really? Well, we need to talk. You do not. Gary Reinhardt, you do not. You people, I don't understand it anyway, and I don't want you to explain it to me. I really don't want to understand it. It's okay. Australian rule football, I know they don't play with pads. You know, they're crashing around in there. Nobody's got any pads on. I mean, there's some tough guys down there in the outback. You hear what I'm saying? Really tough guys. There's a team in Sydney, Australia. It's true now. Team in Sydney, Australia called the Sydney Swans. Now, that's their first mistake. You don't name a football team the Swans. I mean, the kangaroo kickers are something like that, but not the Swans. Yeah, well, listen. Here's the Swans, the Sydney Swans. They are the worst team in the ARFL, Australian Rule Football League. Worst team. They got the worst record. They have the worst players. They got the worst coaches. They have the worst fans. They play at home, and nobody's there but crickets. There's a few people here and there, but it's just crickets. Nobody cared about the Sydney Swans. And then something happened, y'all. They got rid of a few of those players and got some new ones, got rid of a couple of coaches and got some new ones. And those guys began to win some games. And the people in Australia, basically like us in America, we love a winner. And people started showing up again. You used to not be able to give a ticket away to the Sydney Swans. Then it got to the point where you couldn't get one. Everybody, they were there by the thousands. They were the winningest team in the ARFL. I mean, it was incredible. The whole city of Sydney was awash in swan colors and swan memorabilia. They were just everywhere. So one Sunday afternoon, they're playing a game, and you got all these television cameras kind of swooping through the crowds, and I mean, they are manic. They are on the edge. And one camera zeroed in on this one guy who was holding up a sign, obviously a homemade sign. And when he realized the camera was looking at him, he said, you know, he pointed at his sign. Here's what the sign said. I was here when nobody else was. Now, grab hold here just for a second. That is the message of Isaiah 60. That is the message of the New Testament. Jesus is here, whether we're winning or losing. Whether it looks bad or it looks good. Whether it's destitute or it is filled with every kind of blessing you can imagine. He gives and takes away. Somebody say amen. He gives and takes away. Arise. Shine. The glory of God's light is upon us. Are you a child of God? Then that is the honest truth about it. I will never leave you or forsake you. That's the message of Hebrews 13. That's not the first time he said that, by the way. God said that first in Deuteronomy chapter 31 as the children of Israel were trying to get their moxie together to take the promised land. It's the second statement of the law. And he says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. He said it to the entire nation. And then he spoke it to a single man a few chapters later in Joshua chapter 1. Moses is dead. Joshua's going to what? Try to lead these guys, these who? Into the promised land? And God comes and says, you don't be afraid. You be courageous and you be strong. I will never leave you or forsake you. It stands for the community and it stands for the individual. And then the Hebrew writer comes and says it in Hebrews 13 and verse 5. You know what his context is in Hebrews 13 and verse 5? He says, don't fall in love with money. Be content with what you have. Why? Because the Lord said, I'll never leave you and I'll never forsake you. Therefore I say, I'll not be afraid. What can man do to me? That's verse 6. What's your future looking like? You know what? Lift up your eyes and see what's around you. We're part of an unbreakable, undefeated kingdom. Yeah, we got a foot in both places, y'all. We do. We're going to feel whatever goes on here. There's no doubt about that. And I don't know what all that future holds. At the end of the day, it doesn't really bother me. Because I know that light has come from Him. you look at this picture just for a second. Does this look familiar to anybody here? Dim us down just a little bit. There's a box with a flag on it. We know what that box is, don't we? Y'all recognize this? This picture hit the wires August the 19th. There's a funeral August the 19th. And it looks like it's in a gymnasium? School auditorium of some sort? What you don't see there are 1,500 people assembled for this funeral. Inside that coffin is a serviceman, American serviceman named John Tomlinson. He was killed on August the 6th riding in a Chinook helicopter when Afghan rebels brought it down, made a lucky shot and brought it down. 30 servicemen were killed. 22 of them Navy SEALs, of which Tomlinson was a Navy SEAL. He was a member of Team 6. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Those are the ones that took out Osama bin Laden. Killed on August the 6th. Funeral on August the 19th. 1,500 people. This is in Rockford, Iowa. Little school gymnasium. Old town turned out as any American hero deserves. 1,500 people. And this guy. That's Hawkeye. His beloved Labrador retriever that had never left his side and never would leave his side. Stayed right there through the entire funeral, at one point giving up a sigh. What a picture. John's cousin took it. She was sitting over there with the family. For the family members that couldn't be there, she was sitting next to the aisle. She just leaned over and she snapped that picture of Hawkeye and his master. Now hear me about this. God has been referred to as the Hound of Heaven. You know why? Because He's in pursuit of you. He is in pursuit of us. I will never leave you or forsake you. That's the message that we get into our hearts in 2012. Whatever the baggage is that we carry, for good or ill, we're going to move forward. We're going to live in this world. We'll enjoy all that we can. But I want you to know, God's light, God's message says, arise, shine. My light is upon you. That's what we get into our heart. Get into your head, yeah, but get it into your heart. Head doesn't always nail it down. Y'all, you know what I'm saying? I want you to feel it. I want you to know it. Feel it here. Years ago, by the way, up in Ohio, doctors at an Ohio penitentiary got it in their minds that they could cure crime with a little brain operation. There's little plates of the brain. They felt like if they could deal with it, that it would take out criminal activity, the tendency to be criminals. You know, kind of like a lobotomy does, the emotional thing. And they felt like they knew where it was. So there was a volunteer in the Ohio penitentiary, guy that volunteered for the surgery. Of course, the deal was you get a walk. So they performed the surgery on him. Everything looked good. Before his cot got cold, he was back in for crimes against humanity. You don't cure us with a little brain surgery, y'all. It's heart surgery. Done by the Spirit of God. Listen to me. Heart surgery done by the Holy Spirit of God. Let that fade. What are you going to do with this today? What are you going to do with it? As we stand and sing.
Had it not been the Lord who was on our side, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, the anger of the enemy would have swallowed us alive. Had it not been the Lord who was on our side, blessed be the Lord who would not give us up. Blessed be the Lord for His unfailing love. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the Lord. Had it not been the Lord who was on our side, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, the water would have engulfed us, we would have surely died, had it not been the Lord who was on our side. Blessed be the Lord who would not give us up. Blessed be the Lord for his unfailing love. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the Lord.